Hello, Algebra 1.5 students. Hope this Monday finds you nice and cozy and warm. It's one of the last things we're going to be learning this year called factoring polynomials. This is the beginning part of it, factoring out a GCF. Now just to remind you, that is greatest common factor. So when we're doing this, one technique that I've shared with students over the years is writing a blank for our GCF that we're going to figure out, and then I'm starting with a binomial, so that's how many blanks I'm going to put inside parentheses. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to find what's common to both of these things and pull it out. It's kind of like doing the distributive property in reverse. So I'm going to look at the coefficients first. That's the 4 and the 3. And the only thing that's common between 4 and 3 is 1. 1 is a common factor to any two numbers. In this case, there's nothing else bigger than a 1, so that's what we'll use. The second part then is the variable part. So x squared and x, and that's x to the first. It's just a hiding 1 there. So there it's going to be the smallest power because an x squared has two x's in it. It's x times x. So what's common to both of these is 1x. There's only 1x in this 3x term. There's two of them in this 4x squared term. So what can be factored out, what is part of the greatest common factor, is x or x to the first. And now I go back in reverse and I go, all right, well, I want to make this first term end up being 4x squared. I'm doing a 1x times that, so what times 1 is going to give me the 4 part? And that would be 4. And then what times x, this x to the first here, what times, how many more x's do I need to make x squared? And that'll just be one of them. So my first term in the parentheses is going to be a 4x. I've factored out an x. And then I'll go back and start over. What times 1 is going to make that minus 3? Notice I put that minus sign in ahead of time, and so that's going to be a 3 there. I've got 1x already, so 1x times negative 3 is negative 3x, and I don't need any more, so I'm done. That is my final answer. X, or 1x, was the GCF that I could factor out of that original 4x squared minus 3x. And so there is your final answer. You have factored out the GCF of x. So if I would to do the distributive property on this, x times 4x, that gives me the 4x squared. X times the minus 3, that gives me the minus 3x. So it's pretty much doing the reverse of what you just did on that test. So again, I suggest making a blank for the GCF. This is a trinomial that I'm trying to factor, so in parentheses, I'm going to put 3 blanks with a plus sign between the first two terms and a minus sign between the second and third terms. And now I'm just going to go one piece at a time. So the coefficient piece. What is common to 10, 20, and negative 5? There's a 5 that's a factor of all of those. That's the greatest common factor of those coefficients. And then I'm going to do the variable part. Y to the third, y to the second, y to the first. Basically, it's the lowest power so that it's common to all. So there's a y in 5y, there's a y in 20y squared, and there's a y in 10y cubed. So there's my GCF. A 5y is common to all 3 of these terms. What times 5 will make the 10? That answer is 2, so that's the coefficient of my first term inside the parentheses. And then I've got 1y here. I need a total of 3, so that tells me this should be a 2y squared term for that first one. And then I just start over again. What times 5 is going to make the 20? That would be a 4. And then what times y would make y squared? And that would just be y, or y to the 1. And the last one now here is minus 5y. So I've got all that I need right here. I just need a placeholder. So this would be a minus 1. So that when I times it by 5y, I get that negative 5y term. There you have it. That's your final answer. You've taken out the GCF of 5y, and then the trinomial that remains is 2y squared plus 4y subtract 1. Final answer. All right, those are the first two. Here's the next two. I think there's a total of 7 with a challenge problem at the end. All right, so now we start out with negative numbers in our binomial. So when they're both negative like this, when I do the blank, 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 I'm going to leave this sign undone right here, and I'm just going to factor out the minus sign and see what happens here. So not only am I going to look for what number's common to 8 and 12, that's 4 by the way, but also I'm going to factor out that negative sign. And then what's common to x and x squared? That would be an x to the 1. Now this isn't in standard form, that's okay, you can just leave it like this. So then what times negative 4 is going to make negative 12? That would be a 3. And then what times x is going to give me an x? So I don't need anything for my x, or it could be x to the 0, I suppose, but we wouldn't bother writing that. And now for my second term, I'm going to need a positive 2. That times the 4 will give me, negative 4 will give me the negative 8 part of this. And then I've got 1x, but I need 2 of them, x squared. So that gives me x to the 1 for that second term inside the parentheses. Then a quick check. Does negative 4x times 3 give me that first term? Negative 12x, yep. Does negative 4x times positive 2x give me negative 8x squared? And that works as well. So there's your final answer, negative 4x, and then a 3 plus 2x. Now if you didn't factor out that minus sign and had 4x, an alternate answer could be negative 3 minus 2x inside the parentheses. Notice that the two minus signs are inside versus just one being distributed to both of those. So this first one, taking out the minus sign, a little bit better. But this other one, A-okay. So both are correct. All right, our fourth example here, we've got 9d squared minus 15, so that's a binomial. And I'll put a minus sign between those two since I'm going to factor out for my GCF a positive 3 here. That's the only thing that's common. There are no d's with the 15, so only the 9 and 15 are going to have a common factor in this problem, and that's 3. So what times 3 makes 9? That would be 3. And then I don't have any d's, so I'm going to need both of them in my first term there. So 3d squared is my first term inside the parentheses. And then what times 3 makes 15? That would be a 5. And that's all you can do to that one. All you can do is take out that GCF of 3. So final answer, 3 times 3d squared minus 5. All right, 2 more examples here. Go ahead and try this first one here, 8x to the 4th plus 4x cubed plus 2x squared by yourself. I'll put a little pause here, and then I'll work it out. All right, so if you started out correctly, you should have had the GCF blank and then 3 blanks on the inside of parentheses. Looking at 8, 4, and 2, what's the greatest common factor of those 3 numbers? That would be 2. There's a 2 and 4, there's a 2 and 2 of course, and there's a 2 and 8. Then I look at my lowest power, that's x squared, and there's an x squared and x to the 3rd, and also an x to the 4th, so x squared is also part of my GCF. So that's the GCF that I can factor out. And then what's left on the inside, we're just doing the reverse of the distributive property. What times 2 makes 8? That would put a 4 there. And what times x squared would make an x to the 4th? That would be an x squared. Starting over again, what times 2 would make 4? That would be a 2. And then I need one more x there, x to the 1st. And then the last one, you'll notice that's a 2x squared term there, so I need that placeholder of plus 1 there. So there's your final answer. 2x squared is the GCF, and the 4x squared plus 2x plus 1 is the remaining trinomial. This last example is a little bit of a trick question. We're going to do grouping and explain that in more detail in the next lesson on Wednesday, but that is the common factor between these two terms. So that can be my first blank, and then I'll still have blank minus blank for the inside. So you got to kind of think of this as being a big fancy binomial that has a binomial part to it. So that x minus 2 is what's common to both of these big terms, and so I can factor that out and get a 3x minus 4 for the final result. So there, and these should really be in parentheses. It's really like a binomial times a binomial. We'll get into this grouping thing a little bit later. Last example. We're really not doing sticker problems anymore, but this would have been one. So go ahead and give it a try. And so for this one, blank, 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 I see both are negative, so I'm going to factor out that negative 9a. That's my GCF. 9 is the biggest number that goes into both 27 and 18, and that's negative. And then a to the first is what's common to a and a to the third. So I'm going to need a 3 in my first blank inside here, a plus 2a on the inside. So final answer, negative 9a, 3 plus a 2a. Now if you factored in and had the negatives inside, so you had 9a and then a minus 3 minus 2a, a-okay. This one's probably a little bit better. We'd like that negative sign to be on the outside rather than the inside, but both are good. So there's your final answer. All right, I'll attach a PDF with a couple of practice problems for you. Have a good day. Finish up your test if you haven't got to it yet. Get that turned in. Thank you. Take care.